What's up, guys? This is Raz, and I wanted to give you a quick note about the episode you're fixing to listen to. It's a little bit of a departure from our normal format, but what we do is we go way in depth on a story that I think you guys are going to find very intriguing. Trey Edwards talks with us today about 3 different campaigns that he ran that beat over $200 million in tax increases there in Alabama, his home state. It gives us some really good examples of some cool strategies they use that were honestly, I hadn't even heard of them before or thought of them, and they worked really well, and I think they have a lot broader appeal than just in Alabama. These tax increase races are something that every state has a problem with and that we need more people fighting. But they're not just going to apply to tax increases. These are some strategies and some tactics that I think you can use whether you're talking about a local race for taxes or for municipal candidacy or for even something higher up the ballot. Check it out and let us know what you think. I'd love to get your feedback.
This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. This week, we're talking to my friend Trey Edwards, president of TDS Fundraising and Victory Social Media. He's a campaign and social media specialist from Alabama and has a voluminous work history in Republican campaigns of all sizes. Trey has managed more than 40 anti-establishment campaigns for the last 6 years and has an 86% win rate. In 2015, he managed 3 anti-tax local referendum campaigns and defeated over $200 million in proposed tax increases. Trey and I first connected during his work for the Keep the Promise Super PAC network, supporting Ted Cruz for president, where he was our Alabama director and did a fantastic job hardwiring the state for Ted. Now, Trey operates as an independent social media consultant, working with businesses, organizations, and political campaigns. He helps leaders across the country reach just the right people with just the right message, all tailored to be as cost-effective as possible. Trey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. Talk through a little bit about your political background and kind of how you evolved to be where you're at today.
Yeah, well, I don't tell everyone the story, but I want to give a little background on kind of how I got here. I actually, when I graduated high school early, I was homeschooled, and I graduated about 6 months early because my ultimate goal was to join the Marines. I've always had a passion for service, for making the world and making my community a better place. That's how I was raised. And during the process of attempting to join the Marines, I ended up injuring myself in an exercise injury, damaged my lower spine. And it was clear at that point that I was not going to be able to serve my country in the way that I wanted. So I started volunteering on a bunch of different causes and started helping out campaigns, and very quickly realized that I had an aptitude for it, or at least a passion. I went, I think, with the first 2 years. It was 2 years before I actually won a campaign, but the passion was definitely there, and it was very rewarding to be able to go out and put work into something and see a difference being made, and especially once I started winning races and especially winning close races. People think winning a race by a few votes is not as good as winning by 20 or 30%, but in reality, I like the close races because it makes me feel better about, and it kind of makes me feel a little bit more important, I guess. It makes it feel like the work I did was more vital, because I feel like if the person only won by 5 votes, I can tell myself, oh yeah, I did 5 votes.
Absolutely.
So and then 2, 3, 4 years later, being able to see them out doing, those people that I helped get elected out in the community doing great things, and being able to feel like I was a part of that and was able to make an impact there. And now, years after, being able to look back, I've won. I don't remember exact. I have to recount after this presidential cycle, but I think I've got somewhere between 36 and 38 campaigns that I've won over the last 6 years. And
that's incredible.
It's great to be able to see the impact from that now. I mean, the tax fights was probably my favorite one. That was 2015. That was all of 2015. It was more than just the tax fights. We got involved in some special elections that were related to the tax increases. and he won every single one of them. It was probably the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah, talk a little bit more to us about that. I mean, $200 million in taxes. That's a lot of money you save folks in Alabama. How did you get involved with that, and what did that look like?
Well, it actually started. I remember exactly when it started. It was probably January, February of 2015. I shared an article on Facebook about the county immediately south of me planning on doing. They were proposing a $3 million property tax increase, which would have been about $25 million, I think, something like that. They had just raised it by $3 million 2 years previously, and they had won by over 70% the first time, and they were trying to raise it again. And I posted, and I was just like, "This is ridiculous. We can't keep raising taxes. We're talking about a county that's lost tons of jobs and a good portion of their population over the last 20 years, and we can't tax ourselves in prosperity. We can't stand on a bucket and try to lift ourselves up." And one of my good friends who I'd worked with on a lot of campaigns, he's a bit of an activist, both in the Republican Party and just in general. He's also a successful business owner. And he's planning on he's got political aspirations. I'll put it that way. And he's looking to build a resume, get out there, and be seen out there working for conservative causes, helping shrink the size of government or at least limit its growth and making an impact. So when he saw that, and he got really, really interested in it because that was the county that he grew up in. That's where his parents lived, and of course that's less than 5 minutes from where he owns a business. And so he got really, really interested in it. And we sat down with me, him, his brother, and a couple other people all sat down, and we talked about how can we beat this. We're looking at a tax identical to the one that passed, it's like 75-25 2 years previously. How do we overcome that margin? But we thought we're like, okay, this is going to be very difficult. Every single county commissioner voted for this. Every single legislator voted to let it go on the ballot. I mean, we're not exactly going to have a lot of allies here. So they hired me to run a campaign based off of grassroots and social media. Him and his brother put in the money. What they did for all three of these races is they would come in and they would give we were very lucky in this. They would give the campaigns all the money they needed up front, loan them for all their expenditures, and then they would go into that county and head up fundraising efforts and to pay themselves back as much as they could. If they couldn't pay themselves back, they just wrote it off with a donation. But that was able to give us the cash flow that we needed to do what we needed to do and not have to constantly be stressing about where the money's coming from. So we bought a few signs. I think we put out one very, very targeted mailer. So it was very small. It was like less than 2,000 piece mailer. The weak point that we found was in the turnout last time. The turnout was less than 5% back in 2013.
Is this a municipal election?
No, this was a county-wide election. We're talking about a county with about 30,000 people. This was a special it's a special election. It was not in a normal election cycle. It was being held in like April or May, I think, in an odd year. So basically what they do with these tax increases, and this is how most tax increases are passed, is they'll put something on the ballot when nobody's paying attention. And then they'll go out and they'll get all the people that benefit from the tax to go vote for it. Yeah. So they'll say the money's going to schools. And so they get all the teachers and the teachers' families and as many parents as they think will support them. And they go out. They don't campaign. They don't write op-eds in the local paper. They don't put out signs. They just very quietly go to the polls.
Yeah, they don't want anybody to know about it.
Exactly. So in a county of 30,000 people, you're looking at a couple hundred votes being cast, and it's just the people that would be getting the money.
And it's on $25 million.
Exactly.
I mean, this is a big deal.
You've got 200 people taking $25 million from 30,000. I mean, this is not how our system is supposed to work.
Not at all.
So we ran some polling, and we actually found that overall public opinion was on our side. So our goal was not like we were not trying to win people over. Like, okay, we don't actually have to convince people that we're right. We've got about a 60-40 edge in popular opinion. But the problem is, if turnout is below 10%, we're still going to lose because you've got a certain group of people that are always going to go out and vote for these.
Right.
The public elected officials that are trying to get the money, their families, and then whoever it's benefiting and their families. They're always going to go out and vote for it. So you've got that block. And you've got to get more than twice that block of people to go out and vote. So we figured our break-even point was about 8 or 10% turnout is where we could win this thing.
But I mean, that meant that you had to double the turnout, the previous turnout, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do.
People think that that's easy, and it's really not.
Oh, it's tough.
Would be shocked at how hard it is to get people to go out and vote on an issue that they agree with when it's not on a national election with cable TV talking about it nonstop. It blows my mind. But that was what we knew we were facing that obstacle. So we didn't have a ton of money to spend. It was a very small campaign. We spent I think we ended up spending about $3,000 to $5,000 total, all encompassing on that campaign. And we also knew that if we came out and made a big show of things, that we would have opposition, that they would go out there and they would easily raise money from, let's say the money was going to fund construction projects. They could easily raise $25,000 from construction contractors and stuff like that.
Right.
So we knew that we couldn't go out there and just start dumping mailer after mailer and doing press releases or whatever. So we did really a lot of grassroots. We went out and knocked on a lot of doors, put very few signs out. The signs didn't go out until the last 2 weeks, so that they wouldn't be able to mount much of an opposition. But the main thing that we did was social media, because we were able to target. Basically, we went on social media. We narrowed down our geographic audience by zip code, and then we targeted conservative Republicans because we knew that they were more likely to agree with us in opposing a tax increase. And even though this was a Democrat county, it's a very conservative Democrat county. And so we were like, okay, if we target conservatives and just get them out to the polls in okay-ish numbers and get the turnout up to about 8 to 10%, we can possibly win this thing. So we only spent about $500 on social media ads, but we were able to get about 180,000 impressions for that.
Wow.
Just because social media is so cheap. And so we got one the only Republican county commissioner. We got him on our side, and he was the first Republican county commissioner elected since Reconstruction. So it was 140 years. And we got him. He was on our side. He had voted to let it go on the ballot, but he was going to oppose it on the ballot. But he didn't really have any faith that it was going to fail. He was just like, well, it's kind of like, this is how things have always been done here. Really nothing we can do. But we convinced him to let us put out a press release with him opposing it. And of course, as the only person opposing this, that was great political risk for him.
Yeah.
But what we had to convince him was not that it was the right thing to do, but that it would have an impact. He's a very old-fashioned guy. He doesn't use Facebook. I don't think he realizes to this day exactly how much we use that to our advantage. But once we had that credibility, we blasted that out there. We planned everything out meticulously and timed everything. We put that press release out. We created a Stop the Farm Tax Facebook page. We call it the Farm Tax because that is the key audience in that county, and a property tax disproportionately affects farmers. Mm-hmm. So we put out that press release and started promoting the crap out of it. Then we had a bunch of our grassroots activists write op-eds in the local paper as if they had seen this press release and were now incensed, even though we planned this all out from day one. And I remember, funny story, I hope they don't hear this, So we actually ran into an issue early on where volunteers. They're very eager to sign up for things, very passionate, but they don't always have the best follow through.
Yeah, that's the problem.
They have a paid job. They have family responsibilities. I don't blame them. I'm fortunate enough to get paid to do this, so I show up and do my job. But volunteers have a very, very high fall through rate. But we needed to have one or two op-eds at every time the paper came out. So what I did is I sat down and I wrote like 10 different op-eds in different tones of voice, in different attitudes, as if I was different people. And then we basically put these out there to all our volunteers and said, find one of these that matches your personality and let us put your name on it.
Very nice.
So then all we had to do was get them to send the email out. So for like the last month of the campaign, every time the paper came out, we had one or two op-eds in it. And so we were really getting the attention of the older audience that reads the paper, because those people, we can get them to go out to vote if we make it seem urgent enough. Mm-hmm. But so we're able to give this impression of building momentum with very, very little money. And very, very little public attention on what we were doing, because we weren't getting the attention of the establishment. We were getting the attention of average Joe voter, because the politicians aren't reading the op-eds in the opinion section of the local paper. They're reading their own press releases on the front of it. So we were able to build some momentum, but then we decided we did more polling. We seen the momentum, and we reached a point, I think it was about a couple weeks out, where we're like, okay, we think we're going to win this. And we became increasingly confident we were going to win this. We're like, okay, let's use this campaign to test some additional theories that we have. And particularly, we wanted to test the effect of GOTV operations on special elections.
Now, real quick, before you move on to that, at this point, did your opponents have the understanding that you were going to win, or is this something you guys just knew from your internals?
This is from our internals. They had no idea. In fact,
they still didn't see you coming.
The superintendent was on vacation for the 2 weeks leading up to this election and had absolutely no idea that we were even campaigning.
Wow.
He got back on election day. He had not seen these signs. We managed to get TV coverage the last 2 days of the campaign. He had no idea. So he shows up. I'll go back to my story in a second. But so he shows up at the courthouse to get the results in, because again, this is how they do things. This is how they get tax increases. He didn't realize there was any opposition. Didn't realize this was even an issue. Walks into the courthouse to get the election results. I will never forget the expression on his face when he turns the corner and there's 30 of us sitting there in the courthouse wearing these bright yellow Vote No t-shirts. And he's just kind of looking around like, what on earth? I watch him walk over to the probate judge and have him and get handed the results, and just the look on his face. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but that was very satisfying.
No doubt.
But so anyway, GOTV, and in case the listeners don't know, is getting out the vote. And we wanted to test some theories. We wanted to see we wanted to compare different techniques. We ended up having 17 volunteers on election day, including myself and the other leaders, which for a special election of this size and no organized opposition was pretty good. So we actually spent our own money to run multiple polls on election day without mentioning that the election was that day, because we wanted to know what public opinion was the day of the election, and then compare that to the results, because we were wanting to see like how much we were able to even if we were able to get our own people out effectively enough that we could even overstate our support.
So at this point, you guys knew you were going to win because you put in the hard work, and you believed that this model for defeating these tax increases was something you could take elsewhere and have a bigger impact. So you were testing and trying to figure out what the best way you could leverage that model across other elections was. Is that right?
Yes, we wanted to we were thinking ahead, and we're like, okay, if this works, like we think it will, we want to see what we can do to maximize this.
Very good.
So the polling, if I recall, was about 61-39 in our favor. So we're like, okay, we're going to compare this to the election results here when the polls close and see what the difference is. So we did two things. We had one team of 8 people. I was supervising, so I'm not counting myself. One team of 8 people making phone calls, and I was there with them. We had another team of 8 people out knocking doors. The best part is that it was raining, and I love telling. I hate doing this. I'm that kind of person, but I like sending people out to knock doors in the rain because it's 10 times as effective.
Oh, me too. I hate going out and doing it, but I love sending others out to do it because it's great.
Oh, yeah. So what we did is we're like, okay, we took one precinct, the precinct that did the best 2 years previously, where the vote was literally 50-50. There were less than – it was literally – I think it was like 51 votes to 49 votes, something like that. So we're like, okay, this will be a good test. So we sent all 8 of our people into this one precinct, very rural precinct. But instead of having them, walk up to the door and go through their spiel, we decided, okay, we're going to get rid of umbrellas. We're going to be soaking wet. And we are going to have them run full speed from one door to the next. So they were running up to the door and pounding on the door as hard as they could. And the voters would come up and open the door like, what's going on? And they'd be like, they're trying to raise your taxes. They're trying to raise your taxes. You got to get out and vote. And people would grab their keys and run out the door in the rain and get in their car to go down to the polls.
You're running like a Paul Revere trying to raise the alarm about tax increases.
Exactly. And then they would get back in the car, they'd drive down the street, and then they would stop and run out of the car and bang on the next door. So
this is great.
So the results come in. That one precinct, we won that one precinct, 241 votes to 9.
That's great.
And the final election results were 88% to 12.
Whoa.
With 17% turnout.
That's incredible.
And
so you nearly quadrupled the turnout, and you switched it from 70-30 loss. Wow, that's
to an 88 to 12 win.
That's incredible.
And that right there is what really made things take off. It wasn't just the fact that we'd won. It was the fact that one of the last Democrat counties in Alabama is from the PR side of it, from when the state media started covering this and calling us for interviews and stuff. They're saying, look, one of the last Democrat counties in the state just defeated a tax increase, 88 to 12. And keep in mind, all this is going on while the Republican governor is trying to raise taxes. He had like this $700 million tax proposal that he was trying to push through the legislature. So we started getting calls from other counties. We got another rural county on the other side of the state, which was 2 or 3 times as large population-wise. Their executive committee chairwoman for the Republican Party called us and asked for our help. And that was a Republican county, and all of the Republicans were out campaigning for the tax increase. It was all the Republican elected officials. It was a 1-cent sales tax increase. So we called that one the grocery tax. And then we had another one. It was a city, a relatively large city for Alabama, about 45,000 people. They were proposing, get this, a 12 mil property tax increase. In addition to the current 10 mil, we were looking at a 120% tax increase. Not on overall, just on the city rate, but still. Right. They were wanting to build like 3 new schools, these Taj Mahal type schools they were building. None of the money was going into the classroom. It was all going to build these massive college campus like schools because they wanted to be like this wealthier city down the street. They wanted to look like them without having any of the academics, and so they weren't hiring better teachers or improving the quality of education. They were just building fancier schools, or at least attempting to. So the grocery tax, pretty much we basically just followed the same formula. I mean, that one, it was almost too easy. We were just like, okay, we've proved this works. We'll go out and do the same thing. We didn't even have anyone come out and support it. We're just like, okay, we're not going to make a big deal. We're going to run a Facebook page. We're going to do some press releases. We don't care about the local media. We're going to just go out and knock some doors and do GeoTV. That's what we did. And we won that one exactly what our poll showed. It was like 63, 36, 37, whatever, something like that. And the best thing about social media that we learned through these first two was that the local media no longer mattered, because press releases, from my experience in other campaigns, has always been an attempt to gain earned media. Well, we threw that out completely once we realized how cheap it was to advertise on Facebook. We would target our audience. We would put out a press release, and we would simply promote that press release until every single person had read it. And it was far more effective than getting it printed in the local paper. We were able to see people responding to it. We were able to answer questions. We were able to get them to like our page to get our future updates. We were able to turn them into volunteers. We were able to turn them into donors. We were able to activate and mobilize them. And meanwhile, the local paper is sitting there doing puff pieces on which roads will get paved if this tax gets passed. And they weren't getting anywhere with it. So the ability for us to influence to actually influence people's minds on a micro level. We're not talking a presidential race or a Senate race or a congressional race. We're talking a local tax referendum. Able to go out there and educate people for very, very little money. I think we spent $800 on social media ads in that county. And the real fight, though, was the other city. It was in Athens City. And there was a long story that I don't really have time to go into. That was there was some disagreement over whether or not there was another tax increase in South Alabama where taxpayer money had been used to promote the tax increase. They'd spent like $250,000 buying billboards and stuff like that to pass the tax increase. And when that got out, people revolted and not only voted down the increase, but voted down several renewals as well, because they were so upset. And so there was a court case pending. The court case got thrown out on a technicality because the guy that filed it didn't actually live in that county. But I'm trying to think what I can say here. We found out that the local school board members were planning on now opening up the gates and doing whatever they wanted to do because that lawsuit had been thrown out. And so we started running polling. We were asking people, how do you feel about taxpayer resources being used to promote a tax increase? Turns out people didn't care if it was legal or not. They thought it was wrong. So the first one hit right on schedule. At a parent-teacher meet, and it was a parent orientation meeting. They played a video produced by the school system, taxpayer money, where it was a video of the Vote Yes PAC explaining why they should vote yes. And after the video played, they handed out literature and yard signs to the parents at the meeting on school property.
Oh, man.
Yeah, by the way, that's a felony in Alabama. So we were ready. I think I already had a template press release already typed up, just waiting to fill in what they did, because we knew that they were planning on doing it. We dropped that press release, and the strategy we came up with is we did not accuse them of doing any. The angle that we took, we were not saying these are horrible people. We are saying what they did was a felony. In fact, we broke it down. We went, what's the word? We went overboard intentionally. We itemized every single thing they did and accused them of committing a new felony. And we didn't do it all in one press release either. we started a drip. Like every 2 days, we would drop a press release accusing them of a felony. 2 days later, we would drop another press release accusing them of a different felony. The local media picked the first one or two up, then they started not covering them, but it didn't matter because we were putting $100 a pop into these press releases, pushing them out on social media. What we knew, because we knew the personalities of the people doing this, we knew that they were very arrogant. We knew that they would become very, very defensive. They played right into our trap, I guess you could say. They came out and they held a big press conference and basically said, and went on local TV and were like, what we are doing is not illegal. Which was great, because we didn't actually want them to admit that what they were doing was illegal. We just wanted them to admit they were doing it. So
well done.
So they came out, and because we knew that if we kept prodding them, they would keep doing it out of spite. So they did. They started taking donations for the Vote Yes PAC at the school board building. They started selling T-shirts to benefit it at the schools at the school board building. We actually ran a robocall once that ended with, if you want to talk to your representative about this, press 1. And when they did, it dialed the school board building. And they started getting bombarded with citizen complaints. And so we just completely demolished them. And we actually have the tracking polls. And before they did that, we were polling exactly 50-50. Which absolutely shocked me. We're talking about a conservative state, a Republican county and a Republican state, being 50-50 okay with a 120% property tax increase. That blew my mind. But anyway, as they kept doing that, and it was funny on the tracking polls, you can see every time we dropped a press release, they would drop by 2 or 3 points in the polls. And within 2 days. So it went down. On election day, you're talking about messed up. When the court, this is a rumor, we don't have actual proof of this, but I remember making phone calls on election day and looking up and seeing kids running around downtown Athens. And I'm like, it's only 1 p.m. Why are the kids out? And then we got a call. Apparently the superintendent had gone around to the polls around noon and realized that turnout was sky high. So he freaked out and sent kids home early so the teachers could go home and make phone calls.
Well, that's crooked.
No joke. So I know at least 2 teachers that quit over it.
Wow.
So the results came in. We hit our polling within 1%. We beat them 64-36, and it was over 45% turnout in the middle of August in an odd year, which was the same turnout in that county the following year in 2016 when Donald Trump was on the ballot in the primary.
That's absolutely insane.
We were outspent, I think, 4-1. All the architectural companies and construction contractors and everything just started pouring money into it. Because, I mean, we were talking about, it was about 100. They labeled it 75 million, but in reality, we were looking at over 100 million because they were going to pass the tax and then take out a loan based off of the entire revenue over the 30-year period of the tax. And they were going to end up paying an additional over $25 million in interest over that 30-year period. So basically, they were passing a $100 million tax for $75 million worth of projects because they were going to have to pay $25 million in interest.
Wow, that's nice and convoluted.
It's also extremely irresponsible.
I'm not kidding. That's like the worst way to pass a bond ever. Because it's effectively a bond, but they're passing it as a tax. That's awful. There were technically 2 votes on the ballot. There was the tax and the bond. Both failed. But it was just one of those where it was like they were planning on passing the tax that would have generated $100 million over 30 years and passing the bond at the same time so they could take that bond out secured by that guaranteed income. But because they were taking that much money out that early, they were going to have to pay a massive amount of interest on us. But they were billing it as a $75 million tax increase, which was completely false.
they lied over and over and over. It was so easy to call them on every single lie. They were like they actually said that the average cost per homeowner was $10 a month, which was just blatantly false. It was $10 per month per $100,000 home value, and the average home value was over $100,000. Anyway, we kicked their butt. But we actually went one step further. Because they were still pushing these large tax increases on the state level, my friend wanted to send a message basically to the legislators. If you vote for a tax increase, it's going to affect your ability to get reelected. So in this city where we had just defeated the special referendum tax increase with 45% turnout, there was also a special election going on around the same time for state house. The state legislator had passed away, and they were trying to replace him. The best part was the guy who wrote the tax increase bill was running for state legislator.
That's perfect.
Not
perfect
only that,
case,
he
use case there.
To win a 5-way race without a runoff.
Whoa.
In an area that had basically just shut down his bill. So we tied that around we started a new PAC. I'm trying to remember the exact order of events. I guess I can go ahead and say this. The guy's name was Chris Seibert. So we started a PAC called Chris Seibert Loves Taxes PAC. My friend wanted to run a negative campaign, and I told him, I said, look, negative campaigns don't work. They backfire. People in Alabama hate negative campaigns. I see it work in other states. It does not work in Alabama. If you attack someone, if you go negative, doesn't matter what you're saying. The facts don't matter. It will backfire on you. So I said, what if we went completely positive in a way that would hurt him? So we ran, without ever breaking character, a satire campaign. We put out these big signs with a giant red heart on them that said, Seibert loves taxes on one side and Seibert loves Common Core on the other. Because he was the only person to run for state senate the previous cycle that had not promised to repeal Common Core, to vote to repeal Common Core. So, again, we started a Facebook page and started running ads, but we never actually attacked him. What we did is we started running ads him for standing up to the citizens of Athens, and standing against our children's future and doing what needed to be done and supporting a tax increase. And all of our we basically we did everything wrong. For a winning campaign, basically, we just reversed the formula. We targeted the wrong message to the wrong audience.
Right.
We ran ads, and we were running ads asking people to vote for Chris Seibert because he's a strong, principled liberal that will go down to Montgomery and stand with the very unpopular Governor Bentley and raise our taxes and support Common Core. Well, needless to say, they did not take that very well.
I'd imagine not.
But how do you respond to something like that?
Yeah, I love the creativity. That's great.
Do you hold a press conference and ask people to stop supporting you?
Yep, that's a tough one.
So they struggled with it for a couple weeks. They did some really stupid stuff. They printed off these shirts with our logo that said Chris Seibert loves puppies and ran a 5K wearing them in order to make fun of us, which was hilarious because we simply shared their photos without comment and started promoting them, even though we had clearly billed ourselves as satire up to that point. Now people actually thought they were agreeing with us and appreciated our support because they didn't have the context.
That's great.
We didn't even post a comment. We just shared their photo from their page and started promoting it, and people were commenting on it. They're like, well, I thought this page was a joke, but there's Mrs. Seibert right there wearing the T-shirt.
Oh, my gosh.
So it was one of those where they eventually got really, really angry, and they started coming on our page attacking us and they started putting things in the newspaper accusing us of being outsiders trying to interfere in their election, even though we came in at the request of the local executive committee and the local Republican activists. I was simply hired to do so, and his campaign manager was not from that county either. But anyway, so they're sitting there accusing us of all these stuff, and we would simply respond by saying, "What do you have against Chris Seibert? Do you not support tax increases?" But eventually it got to the point where they started calling us out. The local paper printed an article, and it had my name in the article above the fold on the front page, and they never even called me for an interview. And it started getting really, really nasty. So my friend came out, and he said, look, because they started accusing him of laundering money. They could not believe that he was actually putting his own money into this campaign, even though the guy runs 3 or 4 successful businesses. He has for years. He's got the money. They didn't think it was. They came out and publicly accused him of laundering money with no evidence whatsoever. So he came out and he publicly said, "Look, you're going to retract that statement, or this check, which here's a photo of, by the way, with my name on it, for $10,000, is going to go into this PAC, and it's going to get worse." And they did not retract their statement. He deposited the check, and we dropped 4 mailers in 2 weeks leading up to the election. My favorite one, I can't take credit for the concept, but my favorite one was a coupon mailer that we sent out that had these coupons in it that said 1-day sale, for protect taxes, with 1-day sale, higher taxes, redeem coupon code Chris Seibert at your local polling place between these hours on election. We started sending out stuff like that, and he came in first in the primary, but we'd hurt him enough that he ended up in a runoff against somebody else. We really didn't care who else ended up in the runoff initially, even though the guy that won is great. But we knew that we had ticked off his supporters and that they turned out in higher numbers, but we'd hurt him so much that his overall favorability had plummeted. So we had dropped him down to I think he was like 45%. And after that, we realized, okay, now we're heading into a special election primary runoff. The turnout is going to be rock bottom in this. Whatever we do is simply going to raise turnout. If we continue on our current route, all we're going to do is turn out his supporters.
Right.
So we didn't do anything in the runoff. We just let them battle it out. And then on election day, we just called up all our anti-tax volunteers and said, hey, go volunteer for this guy. Go make GOTV phone calls for him. And we just called everyone that we had identified as a anti-tax voter and just called them up and reminded them to vote that day because we knew they would overwhelmingly oppose the other guy. I mean, we didn't campaign. We didn't do anything except the last 48 hours of the campaign, we ran a GOTV operation. And we had 20 people on the ground, and the actual candidate had 2 that we were supporting.
I love the degree of strategy you guys put into each phase of this. I mean, you thought through every facet and tried to turn it on its head, and really baiting, in a lot of these cases, the opposition to doing stupid things, and it worked really well for y'all. Oh, yeah.
We don't ever go into a situation without having extensively planned it out. We spent 3 months running a 1-month campaign. The first month was planning. The second month was preparation, where we had stuff printed and got everything organized and planned out and written and everything. And then the last month was the campaign. But like, people wouldn't know we were even getting involved until the last month.
I wish so many more campaigns, both the initiative and the actual candidates, would do that. And that's something I preach all the time, is the preparation and planning. You know, too many people do the whole fire ready aim when it comes to running for office. If you just spend some more freaking time planning and preparing,
exactly, yeah.
Gosh, I mean, that's what my campaign coach is all about, trying to help you plan and prepare for your campaign. So when you pull the trigger, you know what's going to happen, and you're going to surprise the guys you're running against.
Yeah, I think that is the single deciding factor over whether or not a candidate wins or loses. Um,
You're
if you've
absolutely
got,
right.
I mean, if you have two people in the race that are equally as prepared, equally as fun, and stuff like that, yes, it's going to be good competition. But a lot of for local races, a lot of times nobody running will have any campaign experience, and nobody running will have any idea what to do. So if one of those people goes out and spends 3 months before they announce their campaign educating themselves and preparing and equipping themselves before they announce, they can win. And it won't cost them a dime other than taking your course and buying some books off Amazon and watching some YouTube videos. I mean, that's all you need to get these basics under control. But too many times I sit down with a candidate wants to hire me, and we're 3 months out or even 1 month out from the election, I'll have people call me up and want to sit down and hire me.
Oh, I know.
And they don't have a campaign plan. I've had
no budget, no calendar, nothing
from the election and pay me to write a campaign plan.
Oh.
And
Doesn't it just make your heart hurt? You're like, because a lot of times they're good people, they're conservative, they do a great job if you put them in office, but man alive, they didn't think through what they were going to do there. And so it torpedoes them. And oftentimes I've seen it sink what would otherwise be a promising political career. I mean, because there are ways to lose in which you have a future, and there are ways to lose where you don't have a second chance.
If you come across as disorganized, if people see that you're disorganized, it comes across as extremely unprofessional. And when you run for office in the future, no one is going to invest in your campaign. They're not going to give you money if 2 years previously you ran a horrible, disorganized campaign and wasted money. There was I know a guy who I won't say who it is, but he's very generous. He likes to help the local candidates. Very, very active in the party for probably 50 years. And there were a bunch of candidates fighting uphill battles, and he wrote every candidate in the county a $500 check. Very generous. I mean, we're talking these local campaigns running on $2,000 for their entire race. This was a lot of money. He had one guy that actually, I mean, they all wasted the money. He does not hand out cash anymore because of that. But there was one guy that literally went out and bought $500 worth of Skittles to hand out at ball games, which sounds like a good idea, but he didn't put any campaign stickers on the Skittles.
No. Oh,
and
my gosh.
He didn't even have a T-shirt when he was handing them out. So all anyone knew was that this random dude was handing out Skittles.
Oh, my.
There was no – and, of course, when you're handing out candy to children, you're not stopping to talk to anybody because there's children and they want candy.
Well, they can't even vote.
Yeah, I mean, it's great if you're sitting there in a really nice polo shirt and you have put your campaign sticker, like one side of this little mini Skittles bag is your campaign logo and your website. And you're handing that out. You hand the kids stickers, and then you hand the parent a brochure. That is very, very effective. You've got personal contact. You've got positive contact. You've got brand awareness. You've got them seeing you out there being professional, so you being sociable, being good with their children. It's a positive experience. Like, that's great. But he didn't do any of that. And that was simply poor planning. If he had taken $20 of that $500 and had someone print some stickers, that would have been 100 times more effective than it was.
Well, and even then, spending a quarter of your budget on Skittles is probably not really good budget allocation. You probably want to put a little bit more of that in a ground game and targeting your voters.
For third grade class president.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. My gosh, that's really incredible. Just all of those stories. I mean, beating over $200 million in taxes over what, about a year?
Yes, these were in April, and then the other two were in August. They were a week apart from each other. So the last two were run simultaneously, and then the special election was and the runoff were in like October and December.
So more about 6-7 months actually. You defeated that much. That's really cool.
It was about a 9-month trip. that was great. It was like that was probably the most exciting thing I've done. Being able to work with people they were professional, they were organized, they were educated on how things worked. They knew how to win campaigns, and working with volunteers. The best part about it, I'll tell you though, is the relationships that we made. We took people from from the county we live in, relationships we'd been building, and we got volunteers to go over to the county south of us. And when we finished the first campaign, now all the people that we'd gotten in that county south of us were grateful for our help. So we were able to take them over to the other counties and help them too. So for a special election primary in the middle of the year in Alabama, we were able to bring in close to 20 volunteers that didn't even live in that city, that drove an hour or 2 hours just to sit and make phone calls for someone for 8 hours on Tuesday, just because they knew that this person getting elected was going to result in lower taxes, and they did it because they trusted us, because we had that track record of helping them. And I'm sure that will really help my friend when he runs for his own race here in the next few years.
Well, I sure hope so. Well, and one of the things that I love about what you've done here is you've made a good template. Something that listeners, because I'll tell you, around the country, there's hardly a city in a given area, in a county across the country, that doesn't try to pass some of these ridiculous tax increases. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, like you said, there's no opposition to it. They sneak it on the ballot on an election where nobody's going to show up, and they turn out the people who are going to get paid as a result of the tax being passed. And so it's low turnout, and it's nobody talks about it. And so with just a little bit of work, with some good strategy and a well-honed plan and preparation, you can go out and beat these things for pennies on the dollar. And
one of the frustrating things for me were the naysayers that said that they would have failed anyway because Alabamians opposed tax.
Wouldn't have.
And I'm like, no, you simply never would have known it would have happened. It would get passed, and you wouldn't have known. And these would have passed. They pass every day in America. This is how we've gotten to where we are, of such a large percentage of our income going to taxes. And, I mean, all it takes, you can win any of them. In Athens, we went up against every single elected official in the city. We went up against the superintendent and all the principals and about 80% of the teachers. We went up against $25,000 to $40,000 worth of special interests money. We went up against the Chamber of Commerce, who publicly supported this. The local papers were supporting it. And we beat them with a bunch of volunteers and less than $1,000 in Facebook ads.
I love it. Well, Trey, I tell you what, man, we're going to have you back on sometime very soon to talk about social media, because I know you have a ton to share there. You're actually going to be working with me to help with My Campaign Coach social media here in January, and I'm excited about working with you there. But folks, in the meantime, Trey, where can folks find you online to reach out and talk to you about helping with referendums, beating taxes, and social media help?
Yeah, hit me up on Facebook. Facebook.com/Trey Edwards AL is the page that I use for this type of stuff, or just search for me and add me on my personal account. You can also, if you want to reach out to me, you can go to victorysocialmedia.com. My contact information's on there. If you need help for your campaign or your business, especially when it comes to social media, just hit me up. Happy to help.
Perfect. Well, fantastic insights today, Trey. I appreciate coming on. Guys, next week we'll be back with another episode, and I appreciate y'all listening. Like us on the Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, and make sure you give us a nice rating and 5 stars here on iTunes as well. Y'all have a great day.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.